Good morning, everybody, and welcome to episode 5 of LexTalk. Today, we're discussing the laws relating to e commerce and, of course, the very industry relevance to the whole business, the laws, its applicability to the industry of e commerce. E commerce today is an extremely fast catching business. It's a growing trend, and, of course, in today's day and age, with all of us so glued to have our fingertips glued to our phones, e-commerce is the in business to be in. And who better to explain it than an e-commerce business entrepreneur herself, a person who's been extremely connected to the e-commerce business and actually built an e-commerce business from scratch. Um, we tried getting an introduction to our guest today. Our guest today is Miss Vedanti Imarte. My producer, when I showed him what I planned to speak about in terms of Vedanti's introduction, had to tell me, please ask the audience to Google it up because the introduction is so elaborate that if I ran up with the entire introduction that we planned, we'd probably run out of time on this broadcast. To cut that long story short, and of course, to get straight to the point, Vedanti is an entrepreneur and a director at Vaidehi Foods Private Limited. You will want to know what Vaidehi Foods Private Limited is all about. Vaidehi Foods produces some fabulous Maharashtrian snacks. They also do some fancy salted peanuts, which is the kind of peanuts I earn, but a much tastier version of my salary. The range is, fantastic, and I mean, you should view vaidehifoods.com for the entire list of products because they have a fabulous range. So, Vedanti, thank you so much for joining us on Lex Talk, and I know you have some very, very valuable insights to share with our audiences today on e-commerce.
Yes. Hello, everyone. And Floyd, thank you so much for such a lovely introduction. And thank you, Lex Lucas, for having me here today on your show. As you rightly said, e-commerce is something which, is rising. This particular sector has been growing tremendously in the past 5 years. And our company, Vaidehi Foods Private Limited itself, has, launched its own e-commerce website a few years back. And as you said, that it's not, launching an e-commerce website is not as easy as it sounds, as because there are a lot of different things that one has to look into, especially when it comes to setting up any kind of e-commerce website from the scratch. But fortunately for us, since we already had our business, physical business, so it was a little bit easier process for us since we had all the documentations before.
So
Um,
basically, you were already an established business and you had to just
yes,
move into the e-commerce space. So
yes.
at least, half the load or more than half the load was already in place. I mean, that's fabulous.
Yeah,
Um,
that was something that I think we got an advantage of. But to honestly say that if someone is starting an e-commerce business from scratch, it is a lengthy process because it starts right from understanding all the legal perspectives, which means that what are the documentations that are required, right? So in our terms, being a food industry, if we are starting any kind of e-commerce business, the first thing the people, the first document that is asked is the FSSI license, because just talking about only food industry, FSSI license is a major license which is required to run any kind of food industry or any kind of packaging and reselling this thing, for any shop or manufacturing unit or anything as such. So besides that, of course, the company documentation, which is your incorporation document and your GST registration and all
so,
the
on
different.
that note, Vedanti, why don't we start from the scratch? So could you, I mean, I know the company was established before you came on board as director,
Yeah.
but you were after you came on board as director, you were the person instrumental in shifting to the e-commerce space. Um, you also
Yes.
took over barely a year prior to the pandemic. So I know it must have
Uh,
been you took over the business prior. I mean, a year prior to the pandemic
yeah.
hitting us, so it must have been extremely trying and challenging for you.
Yes,
But of course,
it certainly was. My business was started by my parents, and I came in at around 2019, and it's launched with the We already had a website, just a plain website where we would show our products, but it was not an e-commerce website. So we started with the e-commerce website. We spoke to the person handling the digital. platform and all the requirements of the payment gateways and everything.
Vedanti, I mean, in terms of let's take it from the start, the whole business of setting up. So, in terms of setting up a business entity, so from LLPs to limited liability partnerships to companies, registered companies, private limited companies, as your own is, to firms. The whole. What are the differences? And what would you suggest to the audiences in terms of for those who are interested in setting up, what you should really look at?
So it depends on what what products or what kind of line they want to go into. Because again, when if we are talking about LLPs and companies, it's a different thing. Now LLPs is again something where a individual person can start, and companies is something on a larger scale where you can two-person coming together can start it and all. So it depends on exactly what how you want to put in as a company. And when it comes to e-commerce, it's just the this kind of compliances are something similar to your offline part, but they are necessary for you to do it so that you can get into an e-commerce platform even if you don't have any physical presence as such.
Yeah, what Vedanti is actually saying is, basically you need to first create your corporate entity. And from experience, I think, would you like to share why going into limited liability partnerships or private limited companies would obviously restrict the liability, I suppose. So it would always be safer considering you're operating, out of the internet, to have your liabilities restricted, especially as opposed to proprietorship and partnership firms. Vedanti, setting up a business, I mean, the whole thing, it must be really important for you to actually set up a proper entity, creating a legal status. And, let's take our viewers from the start, from the time your parents, set up the business and, getting the private limited registered. So, you have various business models in terms of, proprietorship, partnership, LLP. Private limited, and of course, hopefully, Vaidehi Foods will be a public limited company in the future, listed on the exchanges.
Yes. So yeah, so the reason for us to take private limited company was that in the hopes that we will grow further. And yes, as you said, we definitely, you know, are we are definitely thinking of going in the future, if possible, the public limited as well. So yeah.
So basically, what you're saying is, the limited liability benefit of a company, and of course the scope to expand and grow the business with a private limited company is far better than with a firm or a partnership.
Yes, and then any other firm or partnership, definitely, because there's scope to go higher and reach the and grow into an organization as such.
Great. So could you just run our viewers through, like, the basic steps of getting started with a company? How do you start the whole business model? Get yourself registered, at least the physical entity of the business, and then of course later on we'll move to the e-commerce bit.
Okay, so the basic thing is that right from the start, from the scratch, is that the first thing you have to choose, which legal structure you will be going into. Then your name, your company name is important, and it's very important that while also you're choosing the name, it's you have to look at the point where you are not choosing a name which is already being claimed by someone else, because again that could be an issue in the future. And the other things that one has to look at is licenses are very much important. That if in terms of this thing, we know that FSSI is an important license which has to be taken by any kind of food industry. Similarly, if for any other industries their licenses are applicable, then it's a major part that one has to look into, depending on which products or which services the person wants to start with the e-commerce business from. Besides that, you're registering your company under companies corporate affairs. This thing, Companies Act, is very important, because you can do it through ministry, of your ministry corporate affairs. You can go there and you can register your company. And besides that, next thing that one has to look at when you are actually looking, see, these are something which are same for the offline. If you're building a business offline, the same documentations, these are required for e-commerce as well. But the major part that is required for e-commerce is the payment gateway. If you are trying to set up an e-commerce business or a website, the payment gateway is something that is very important. And according to the Payment and Settlement Act, which was there in 2007, there are a lot of guidelines which have been given by RBI, and according to that, it's very much mandatory for any kind of e-commerce website to process payments through that particular payment gateway. And now I feel that with the unified payment interface, and it has become quite easier for people also to get those payment net what you could say gateways set up for their different businesses.
Also, in terms of post the pandemic, people have been shopping more online as compared to physical stores and markets. And of course, the whole thing of e-wallets, the use of e-wallets, so everyone's on a payment gateway through an e-wallet. Doesn't that make, in your opinion, would it really make business in terms of e-commerce, the ease of operation, a lot more comfortable for both the users as well as the entrepreneurs?
I think it definitely would, because instead of every time pulling out your card or putting your transaction details while you're doing any kind of purchasing, so instead of doing all this thing, if you have everything settled us in your apps, but also see it as much as easier it gets, there are also some kind of drawbacks of these things and security issues that will have to be looked at. But yes, ease of payment is definitely there when it comes to different kinds of wallet payments, or some kind of UPI payments or any
Very,
kind of.
very true. And then, talking about that, it brings us to the whole gamut of data protection policies and, their terms of service and, the whole thing of establishing proper terms of service. Because, of course, you have the data protection rules under the IT Act 2011. You also have a data protection policy underway, which is in the bill phase at the moment, to what I am aware of. So, how do you manage data security? How do you make sure you're, actually compliant with all of these laws? Because that's very essential that you're compliant with all of these laws.
Yes, that is absolutely true. In fact, with the new draft rules which have come up, the government also insist, that with the e-commerce company that we have, that the data is a very sensitive matter, and it cannot be sold to any kind of third party without the explicit consent of the customer. So definitely, if these rules come out, and if they are these are very important, and they have to be really put forth now. And as it is, to be honest, all these rules that we have in terms of e-commerce are very scattered. Okay, so they are not put in under one complete what you
Very
could say
true. Because in
uh,
fact, we
or
were
any.
discussing this at the academic level, and the whole question of multiple laws that are operating in the space of e-commerce. So even when you look at it from a consumer perspective, the whole question of, if I am buying something on a site, whether it's a marketplace, I don't want to get there because marketplace legality is quite different to running a single straight off e-commerce platform. But when you look at it, so I am a consumer, so I come under the Consumer Protection Act, and then of course there are other contract related issues that come in. So you're again then diversifying to the extent of the Indian Contracts Act. Your Payments and Settlements Act, of course, comes in separately, because as far as governing my transaction is concerned, and as you rightly just pointed out, in terms of my data being safe in your hands, becomes a matter of concern, which is the data protection policy that comes in.
Yes, true,
So
but of course.
a lot of laws that all operate together, and the question of the interpretation of various statutes, the operation in synchrony, and at times I assume you may have conflict of statute as well.
Yes, certainly. And all these things, so I think there's a quite, basic need for all the regulations to come under one complete act, where it can only define, e-commerce or this thing. With the growing of the e-commerce business, it's very important. Also, one more thing, Floyd, I think I just would like to speak about once is when we talk about e-commerce business, there are two things that, one has to understand. If someone wants to get into an e-commerce platform, so first thing is the marketplace, which is basically the e-commerce businesses which are working as an intermediaries, which give you the platform to sell your products, which is basically they giving you platform, you put your products there, and the customers the buys from it and give it. And the other one is your direct e-commerce website, which are actually you know are smaller e-commerce website which are directly dealing with the consumers. So basically, there are two models when we are looking at when it comes to e-commerce business. The first model is something called inventory based model, which is like a small e-commerce website or a company who is running its website and directly connecting to the consumers, which means that the consumers places the order on their website itself, and the product directly reaches them. The second part is your marketplace. So all those big companies have the marketplace which works as your you know intermediary, which gives you a platform to put your products there, and with the other different sellers, and then consumers can pick and choose whichever they want, and then that the responsibility of delivering those products is of that particular marketplace, e-commerce websites. So that is what, there are two things. So this is something which any person who wants to start a e-commerce business should definitely look into, that where exactly they would like to start it with.
I'm going to interrupt you here, Vedati. I'm extremely sorry, but you can. I know you'll probably complain to my producer on this, but I want to cut you here and ask you a very fundamental question. That in terms of the laws of contracts, you have vendor agreements, I assume, with the marketplaces, or you have vendor agreements with third-party e-commerce platforms, other than, of course, what you're selling on your own site. So how
Hmm.
important are these contracts, and are they kind of shelf contracts, or are they customized, or do they just hand the contract to you, and pretty much you are compelled to sign on the dotted line? What is the negotiating power in these contracts, and how do the, what is the contract law related to this?
So, to be honest, when it comes to any kind of micro or MSME business, I think they are basically shell contracts, because they have listed down all the details and all the different agreements and the points, and you just go through them and you think that yes, okay, these are quite okay, we can abide by them, and you sign and give it. They are quite general as such, but the thing is that we as a MSME, we do not have any power of in terms of negotiating, because as a small business, what we think is that we need to make sure our brand is seen on the different platforms. So yeah, I believe those are the shell contracts, but yes, otherwise, if there are any bigger companies, I'm sure there must be some negotiation or something.
Also, I mean, in terms of the pricing, I assume you all must be having quite a time, trying to compete with the excessively competitive pricing structures, on the marketplaces at least. How do you
Yes.
really handle that pressure?
So pricing is a kind of an disputed aspect at times, because what happens is, as you rightly said, there are a lot of competitions going on. So it's always a race to give maximum discount and to reduce your cost. Sometimes at the in such a way that even even if you can't, you have to reduce it at times and sell it. But another part is also that now the pricing thing, another one more important part I would like to discuss is that various e-commerce has different kinds of their terms and conditions, right? Their margins are set, the different things. So even that kind of impacts the pricing that we keep on the
Very true.
e-commerce website. So what is personally, what I've personally, my opinion is that the prices should remain the same across the whole platform, because that has, it's a consumer's right to have a proper product with a proper price. But because of this kind of discrepancies and different kinds of terms and conditions with every different e-commerce marketplace, sometimes the price do go up and down. And unless and until I think there should be some kind of rules for this as well, uh, for this
So
particular.
generally, of course, in most cases, I think the e-commerce platforms put the entire buck of liability onto the manufacturer,
Yeah,
because they
that
say
is
we're only an intermediary, we're only a marketplace, interfacing manufacturers with customers. But
absolutely, that is true. That is true. That do happens.
so, have you all
But
had any issues as such with this? I mean, where you've had complaints coming in, or someone dragging you to consumer court. I know your products are exceptional, so I don't think you would have ever been dragged to consumer court. But
no, it did happen once with us that we were on a marketplace and we would get the orders, and the responsibility of shipping it was of the marketplace, of that particular e-commerce marketplace. But for some reason, the pickups were not getting done on time, and our orders would get cancelled time and time again. And in spite of putting a lot of complaints, it didn't happen. But then last, finally, we had a breakthrough with them, and that's how. But yeah, this is a major issue sometimes, that in spite of you having all the setup, you have products are ready, everything, if the onus, the responsibility of the delivering, if the marketplace, if that doesn't work out, then again that is kind of reflects badly on the brand. in spite of it not
Very
being
true. Though it's not really your fault or within your control, but eventually you have a dissatisfied or a disgruntled customer, which at some point the brunt is borne by all.
yes. So I think that is one of a little drawback when we are putting it in marketplace, because when you have your own website as such, you can directly get in touch and you can solve those issues. So some part of it is definitely in your hand, but at times,
So basically, I think the only way we can solve this problem is now Vaidehi Foods goes off with a snack bar where we can come directly and eat straight out of your kitchens. That would be like, there would be no way we could go wrong that way. It would
so
be
we should start
absolutely
setting up.
fresh and
Okay, now you have now put that idea in my mind. So now let's
thank you.
see.
And I have a few hundred viewers listening to this, so I know where I can claim my royalties from in case the company is only paying me. In terms of
Yes.
e-commerce, another thing that we came across, when we were looking up at things, and in fact, we had a lot of complaints which came. Actually, we were doing copyrights and trademarks earlier with the previous episode, and. The speaker there itself was very convinced that there's a lot of violation of these intellectual property rights. Now, have you had cases where you have identity theft, maybe yours or maybe someone within your business circles, where a trademark has been infringed or somebody has kind of made something which is deceptively similar, try to replicate a brand and make products on your behalf, or any sort of
See, the thing
infringement?
is, these all, yeah. So, with the market, anything is possible. That if you have already a brand and some other person decides to do it in the same, with the same name or with the same products. But that's why it's very important that one registers their own brand logo or their brand name on the trademark. So yeah. So when it comes to what you rightly said about people taking up the names, your name and your products. So yes, there have been one or two cases where this has happened with us. But that's why I feel it's very important that you register your company's logo and your company's name in your trademark as well, because then it gives you some kind of protection from the infringement, as well as
So basically, getting the brand name registered, the brand logos registered, very important. What would would you suggest, like, especially if you're a brand like yours that's quite diversified in business, multi-class registration, registering under various classes so that you're covered from every angle, I think would also form pretty important, cover as far as this. I'm sure you all must have had people trying to replicate it with, cheaper variants and more cost-effective, as they say, options.
the important aspect of getting a trademark registered, is that so that you can protection from the infringement as well as the passing of the goodwill. Consumers know that our
True
products
as
are.
true as we in legal say, he who is prior in time is prior in law. So I'm sure he who is prior in taste is also prior in the
Besides,
hearts of
besides
consumers.
our
So
logo and everything is, have been registered in trademark, so we are not that worried about.
then going, let's take it a bit from the other side. I mean, as since I have you, and these are very rare opportunities I get to have someone like you on my show. So I'm going to squeeze this opportunity that I have to the fullest. I mean, having discussed all these things, okay, in terms of so I'm sure you must have faced somebody messed up your delivery, which is why you had a question of a defective product or a deficient service coming to you or whatever. But when you look at it now, I want to take you right 180 degrees across platforms. I mean, not to you as an entrepreneur and you as a business person, but more to the other side of things where the consumers have to face it. So when you're looking at e-commerce now as a consumer point, so say I'm buying products online, how do I secure, so how do I really know the product is genuine in terms of the consumer protection law? How do what are the laws that protect me as a consumer?
So I think the consumer can definitely go to consumer court and complain. But another aspect what I would really like to say here is that even if the consumer goes there, there is not a clarity when it comes to e-commerce that where the consumer has to go, as in which kind of which action has to be taken for what exactly thing, or which whom to approach. So I think this all things when it comes to e-commerce, there has to be a little bit more clear guidelines in term for the consumers itself, that where they can approach, whom they can complain, and if they can directly complain it to the marketplace where they are kind of regarding the companies whatever product that they want, or as I already mentioned that if it's a small e-commerce company like us, the consumer can definitely call on the customer care, and the small our company as such can whatever address whatever grievances that they have.
So I'm sure you definitely don't have any disgruntled customers or any consumer grievances, because if there was even the minor chance of dissatisfaction, you would have already satisfied the customer.
Oh, the thing is, you would be surprised. We do get some kind of customers who say that, they did not like our products or something. But I think it's fine because every customer or every consumer has a right to their own taste, to however they, perceive that product to be. And I think it's we accept all this thing. It's fine. So we have had customers calling us saying that, the products are very good, but in oppose we also have had customers saying that, they did not like it. They did not. I think it's very important that any e-commerce company takes the feedback and it takes it in a very good way and try to, understand what exactly where they have gone wrong, so that it helps them to, improve and see where any kind of mistakes are happening and can correct it. Ultimately, customer satisfaction is important because
True, and
everything we
that's,
do
I think,
has
true
to.
with every service and every product being manufactured. I mean, the ultimate goal is to satisfy the customer's needs and demands.
So I believe that when we are talking about e-commerce industry or e-commerce sector as such, there are a lot of benefits as well as a lot of challenges the e-commerce businesses face. In terms that, if you are just recently launching any e-commerce business of your own, then there's a constant pressure of pulling out, putting the offers and the discounts so that you attract as many um, those things, as well as, there are some kind of, what you could say, there's some back end work also that has to be looked into continuously. And it also has its different legalities when it comes to payments, and if the payment has not been, payment has not been transferred, the customer has made the payment, and again it's a constant thing that the company, has to keep in touch with
So
the
the integration between the payment gateways and the
information.
operations
Yes,
teams,
yes,
and so
exactly.
it's a lot of hard work and a lot of responsibility keeping all the
Yes,
organizations together, your delivery partners, your payment gateways, and
yes,
of
that is
course
abs-
customers
absolutely, absolutely.
satisfied is another challenging task in itself.
Yes, true. But what I would say is now, it's a since the whole trend is shifting towards e-commerce, a lot of opportunities as well for any person who wishes to start their own, maybe a service, or maybe, say, a service website or a product website, or however, whichever business that they want to start with e-commerce. So yes, I think down the line it's going to be the major aspect where people would most likely shop online rather than going offline. Of course, there's a different kind of debate altogether, but yeah, major of the products could be, purchased online. So I think the whole thing, the trend is shifting towards the online.
Towards the
Um,
online platform, also with the
yes,
kind of schedules people have, and the running around, people, at least the younger generation, I'm sure doesn't have the time to actually sit and browse through the physical supermarket, so you can do your online purchases while you're on the go.
yes. In fact, I think this pandemic period, the last 2 years have really given that glimpse, what kind of life it could be ahead, and that doing everything online when you're sitting at home, you.
Okay, and I want to take you back to where you started off in terms of the multiplicity of laws that govern e-commerce for one, and of course the other aspect of, do you think there are too many laws, and there is a need for a consolidated law to govern e-commerce, where both the vendors, the business entities, as well as the consumers could have a centralized redressal system or a centralized system of governance, rather than because if you have your authorities under the payments settlements act. So if it's a cyber crime, it goes, it becomes a criminal offense, of course that cannot change. But in terms of your consumer laws, there is so much of it. And of course with the large marketplaces, there's always this buck passing, because someone says, you've bought it on an e-marketplace, you've not bought it from our store, therefore we are not responsible. Where does a customer go for service? And how do they actually redress the issue at hand? Because I mean, every customer would not be as fortunate as your customers to have such a speedy and efficient redressal system. So the maybe larger chains, or every the ethos of each company would obviously create different circumstances. So how do we, in terms of a legal system, how do we kind of consolidate this so that we have it all set?
You're absolutely right. The thing is that all the laws right now are very scattered. They're not in one place, and there's an urgent requirement for some kind of statute that will be able to address all the legal aspect. Okay, that comes under a single e-commerce, what you could say, e-commerce act, where the consumers will get their this thing where they will be where they will know where they have to go and complain, and from the business point of view as well, for all the different grievances that from the business part they have. So it's better to have everything consolidated under one under one act as such, or under one rule.
What you're saying really makes a lot of sense if you can have something which is a more consolidated, centralized kind of
That
system.
is true. That is true. That is absolutely right. That there is one consolidated act which is required. Plus, to be honest, consumer also has a complete in within Consumer Protection Act itself. If there is some kind of new provisions made for e-commerce, for e-commerce grievances, I think that would be good, because they already have a Consumer Protection Act where they can go to the consumer's court, and they can whatever grievances that they have, they can speak there. But besides, from the business point of view, for all the different things, now you have IT Act, which is covering one aspect of your digital, which is actually giving the recognition for the digital transactions or any kind of digital piece that are happening. And besides that, there are all the different other Indian contract acts, and then we are talking about electronic contracts as well, which is again coming into your IT Act. Electronic contracts, which are
Very true. Again,
basically,
there's an overlap between the principles laid down on the
exactly,
Indian
so there are a lot
Contracts
of
Act and
things.
the
Yeah,
IT Act.
so these overlapping can, be done under one particular act when it comes to just e-commerce.
On a closing note, what would you advise viewers? Or viewers basically are people who are from the startup community, e-commerce professionals, and of course we have a large legal fan following as well. So, in terms of the entire audience that's present, what would your suggestions be in terms of the status of e-commerce businesses and the way forward? I mean, in terms of both the business perspective and the legal.
So in terms of business perspective, I would say that if you are planning to, or if you're already there, if you have already established an e-commerce website, well, congratulations, and you should definitely go ahead and do it. And when it comes to legalities, there are still long way to go for everything to, for all the things to consolidate together. But till that time, you can refer to all the acts which are currently available for the e-commerce businesses, and accordingly, you can start your business or look into all the different aspects as well. And e-commerce is something which is a future right now. So it's I think this is going to be there for a very long time, and it is going to evolve in a even in a more advanced way. So
Great. Thank you so much, Vedanti, for being on Lex Talk episode 5 with us, discussing all the various nuances to e-commerce, and it was a sincere pleasure having you on Lex Talk. Thank you for being with
um,
us.
thank you for having me here.
That was Vedanti Imarte, director at Vaidehi Foods Private Limited. Stay tuned to the Lex Ducos social media handles, and of course, do subscribe to the Lex Ducos channel for several more episodes of Lex Talk. Thank you, and God bless. See you next time.